Good morning. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
Absolutely fantastic. So, to be able to do what you're doing with this podcast, this is the kind of stuff that, behind the curtain, behind the closed
hmm
door, you're letting us inside the thought process of those that have been chosen to lead.
Yes, absolutely.
So, how are you knocking down that door? What are you doing? Going in there with a hot cup of coffee saying, tell me your stuff, dude.
So, our real goal, I guess, is to kind of have it be more of an intimate conversation between people who we think might be inspirational or
Mhm.
motivational for folks who are getting into the games industry, people who want to be content creators, be it through Twitch or YouTube. So, we want to try and make it feel like an approachable kind of conversation that's happening in your living room kind of thing, because a lot of the time the information out there is very formal, it's really hard to access. So we're kind of finding this as a way of having like a kind of conversation with friends.
It's almost like the inside sleeve of a record album, then, because in all honesty, how many gamers really know the story? I mean, they'll tell you how a game
Yes,
evolved, but they don't know the actual inner makings of what took place.
absolutely. And I feel like something that has been really important for me. I used to work in the games industry. I wasn't a developer, but I was a project manager. And I feel like a lot of the time we see very people who are very up in front and in the center and in the spotlight, and those are the people we hear from. But we don't hear from the people who are maybe directly working on the game and are less like public about it. So this is a great way for us to be able to talk to people who might have a unique perspective on how game development works, how community management works, things like that.
Hollywood, of course, has had a great time trying to live up the life of those that are building the games. They turn it into a competition. It's all secretive, and
hmm
all that kind of stuff. But there really is a business in the process, isn't there? I mean, you've got to have structure.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's almost like the games industry has been kind of shrouded in mystery for a very long time. And now that it's becoming such a big thing, because I mean, gaming is quite mainstream now compared to where it was whenever I first started gaming as like a 5-year-old. And I feel like now we're kind of slowly starting to chip away at it and figure out what's going on. And the behind the scenes thing that you were mentioning earlier, people are starting to learn that there's a process and it's different for everybody, and now we're actually getting to access that instead of it being something that we're like how does this work, how do I get a job in the industry, like what happens when you're a part of it.
And you know what? I'll tell you what really inspires me most about gaming. Why I love to watch people game is because these wars that we fight these days. A lot of those people are gamers. Those
Yeah,
people, that hand-eye coordination really does work.
yeah, absolutely. And do you know what's really interesting? I was actually watching a video a couple of days ago talking about how video games could be used for therapy, and how like adult play therapy is a thing. And there's just so many different applications for gaming that I think we've got stuck in this mindset in the past that oh, it's for nerds and it's the thing that people do in their basement or whatever. And it's totally not. And there's like so many different things. It's used for training, like you say, hand-eye coordination. It's really, really great. It's a great way to bond with people. It's really wonderful.
Well, I'm going to age myself here because I was in that bowling alley when foosball was no longer the big thing and nobody was dropping quarters on the
Oh,
pinball machine. There was a new thing called Pong. I'm
oh
telling
my
you, that
gosh.
changed my life.
I respect that. I've never played Pong, but I did start playing games when I was 5, and that was I'm going to age myself a little bit. That was 1994 was when I played my first video game.
And why are they still called like video games and stuff like that? Is it because of the video screen? Because I mean, it's like one of those things where it's become such a wave in our life it's like what is a name that'd be like me going up to Mark Maron and saying we got to change the word podcasting. It kind of sucks, Mark, and he literally told me saying shut up, back off, dude.
I think it's just become one of those things. Like it originally, obviously, was because of the medium through which they took place,
Hmm.
and I think we just kind of like hooked onto it. It's almost become a meme a little bit now because like people will say like video games, but they'll say it kind of like not in a derogatory way, but like kind of in a jokey way. And I think that's just it's culturally just stayed. We've clung on to it, and maybe one day it'll change. It's the same with like esports, for example. I remember when I worked in the industry directly, I was told that there was a very specific way you were supposed to spell esports. You couldn't
Hmm.
spell it with a capital letter unless it was at the beginning of a sentence because, brand guidelines. And it was always so weird. It's the same with email, right? Like it's one of those things that will evolve over time, but for now it's still video games.
Does that inspire you that esports have really taken over in a way that I mean, my God, people from around the world are getting together
Oh
like the
yeah.
Olympics?
I think it's amazing because I have been kind of a part of the scene from like a more local level. I used to play competitive games whenever I was a teenager. And seeing it go from these like tiny little pockets of tournaments that were kind of local or like national
Hmm.
to being literally across the globe. It's amazing. Being able to see people going into an arena and watching games, people are playing a game on a stage with a massive
Yep.
screen behind them and everyone in the audience watching it. It's so exciting.
That's so funny that you bring that up because my wife and I were talking about our grandson who likes watching people on YouTube play games, and it's like
Yep.
I don't get it, man. But they're seeing things that the rest of us don't.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my job now essentially is I play video games on the internet and people watch, and that's very exciting for me because as a person who like literally I play games all the time, being able to do that as a job is really really cool. And those are the kinds of people that we want to interview as well on the podcast because it means that you're kind of finding people who are doing maybe kind of weird stuff, off the beaten track kind of things that are really interesting.
Yeah, because every gamer has a story. We just don't know the
Yeah.
story. I mean, it's that voice in the headphones. It's that one person that you may see, well, once a day or once a month, but you don't know their journey.
Exactly. And everybody has, I feel like we all have kind of bonded through gaming and there's so many nice stories of like people who've met someone like some of my best friends are people I met through gaming and they've not necessarily been local. Like I'm from Northern Ireland. I've met people from literally all corners of the globe, like everywhere, and have made some really, really good long lasting friendships through it. It's something that I think is evolving a lot now because we're doing a lot more multiplayer gaming. It's really cool.
And just between the two of us, you do realize there's probably some Ukrainians and Russians that are gaming and they have no idea or even care about that war. But they're still gaming because
Absolutely.
it's their connection.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a thing, and there'll definitely be people who have, no matter what their differences are, gaming is a way that they end up connecting.
Yeah, yeah. So I got to ask you that when you get in there into the room of these CEOs and stuff like that. I mean, I spent years trying to get to know who Bob Pittman was because he was this guy that created iHeartRadio, and I just wanted to have a
Mhm.
conversation with him. Just like you said, it's just a conversation. How are you getting into that room to share that conversation? Because a lot of these CEOs, I mean, it's tight lip.
Oh yeah, it can be. So for most of the things that we're doing right now, we're trying to kind of utilize one of the things that, especially in the games industry, because the games industry is still quite small. You have your network, and you essentially everybody knows somebody who works for insert company here. So, for example, for myself, there are people who I've worked with who I may have worked with on a specific project, but now they're working for something else, and I'm like, hey, we'd really like to talk to your CEO, or we'd really like to talk to a person who did something particularly interesting on this particular game. And being able to utilize that network and get the contact details, because let's be honest, they're not always public. It's quite hard to find them. Utilizing the people that you already know and kind of being like, okay,
Right.
well, can you maybe do me a solid and put me in touch with this person? And sometimes it won't work. Sometimes the person just doesn't have time. Sometimes they don't want to reveal their deep secrets. But it is actually a really, really handy way of kind of getting to meet people and have that conversation with them.
But my God, what you're doing with boss level though, do you not see it inside your heart that you could be actually training future leaders?
Oh gosh, yeah, I hope so. I definitely feel like boss level is a thing that I wish I had had when I was starting to try and get into the industry. If I'd had a podcast that was having these conversations, asking these questions, because a lot of the things that we ask are things like, what's a really good piece of advice that a mentor has given you?
Mm-hmm.
Or for yourself, like one of the questions that I personally really like is what is the boss level moment? And like we use boss level as in a boss fight in a video game. What was your boss moment? What was the thing that you have done that you would like to share? And I feel like that's something that we maybe don't talk about enough.
See, and what I love about it's not that I like to hang out with bosses because I'm not sucking up to anybody, but I what I love to do is I like to get into their head. I'm that architect that likes to ask the question why. Why is the window on this side of the house and not on the other
Hmm.
side? And
Right.
bosses, if you get in there correctly, all of a sudden they now have a listening post that they'll come to you going, so I was thinking of this idea. Have you run into that yet?
A little bit, I suppose. I think it's something that we will probably see more as we go further down the line.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that one thing I really hope, and this is just between you and me, this is something I really hope that we'll get. I hope we'll get an interview with somebody where we ask them a question and it makes them really stop and think and go, actually, I really don't know why we do it that way. Maybe we should do it a different way.
Right.
Because that's really interesting. And I feel like if we can have even the tiniest little bit of impact where somebody goes, actually, we could do this so much better, that would be really cool. I'd be very excited for that.
Yeah, because a lot of them are open. They're open for new ideas. It's just that a lot of employees go, well, I don't want to push the envelope because I want to keep my job. Screw your job. Get in there and do something. Make a difference.
It's very, very hard, but I think it's something that's worth doing, is just trying to do something differently.
Yeah.
And that's definitely why we want to talk to different people from like diverse areas in the industry, because people do things differently. We don't know what everyone's journey has been, what everyone's background has been. Something we talked about on the podcast in a recent episode was like, you know, people who grew up poor and maybe didn't necessarily have access to all of the different games consoles whenever they were starting to play games. How did that change their experiences when approaching gaming and approaching the games industry? These are things that I'm really interested in, and I think these stories deserve to be told, you know?
Oh, my God. You just hit a big thing with me. I came up very poor in Montana, and I didn't have the quarters to play the video games. But
Right.
I'll tell you what I did, though, is I could afford graphic paper. I would go buy the graphic paper and play those games on paper and sit there and try to predict what it was going to do next. So it became a visual in a different way.
That's really interesting. So like I was actually talking on our recent episode. I personally grew up with, my dad was a factory worker. My mom was a full-time carer for my sister, and we grew up very not well off. And I'm from Northern Ireland. We didn't have a ton of money. So whenever I got my first console, it was like the best thing that had ever happened to me. It was so exciting. And I played the like 3 games I had access to so much, and I was so good at them. And now I go back and try and play them again, like as an adult, and I'm rubbish at them. And I'm like, how did, like, you know, 8-year-old me play these games, and how was I good at them? How did I finish them? I don't understand. It's because it was the only game I had.
That's the way I was with Space Invaders and stuff like that. When I got my first Atari back in the 1980s, I mean, it was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing. But the problem is, though, is that one day after playing for like 9 hours straight because I wanted to hit 1,000,000 points, it was like, what did I do today? Oh God, I can't do this ever again.
It is. It's a huge time investment, right?
So now when you put the podcast together, first of all, you're working with 4 different people here. I do commercials for medical institutions and stuff like that. I can't get 5 doctors to say yes to one commercial. How the hell do you guys get along?
So what's really interesting, I think maybe not everybody knows this. So the 3 other hosts, we didn't all necessarily know each other super well before we started on the podcast, and we kind of had a few calls to get to know each other a little bit beforehand. We'd all kind of bumped into each other through streaming, because a lot of us, we do full-time streaming on Twitch. But it was one of those things where we just kind of clicked. We sat down, we had a conversation, and we had a really frank conversation. We were talking about like the kinds of issues we face, the things we wanted to cover with the podcast, and why it was important to us. So things like wanting to hear from people we don't always get to hear from, because it's a sad fact that you don't get to hear a lot of diverse voices when it comes to the games industry. So we were talking about why that was important, and why we wanted to talk about the positive things and not always be focusing on the negative, because that's another big thing that happens a lot, especially with streaming. So when we discovered that we all kind of had the same feelings on it as each other, it became really, really easy. And now the way we do it is there are 4 of us, but we generally will tag team and have 2 people with a guest. So nice. 2 of us will interview a guest, and then the next episode it'll be a different 2 people, and we just kind of rotate between each other, and we all get along really, really well, which is very, very good.
How has Zoom changed the playing field? Because for me, it's like, God, I can talk with who, when, what? Let's do this.
Oh, it's definitely useful. So obviously, I'm the only one who's like outside the States. So it would have been very inconvenient if I was supposed to be a host, but I was all the way over in Ireland. So Zoom has made that really easy, and it means that it's a lot easier to kind of communicate with anybody, really. Like we have guests that we're hoping to talk to from England. We have guests that we're hoping to talk to from the States, people from Ireland, people from different parts of Europe. And it means that we have the ability to get everybody into a virtual space at the same time. Whereas obviously without Zoom, that was going to be a lot trickier.
So what happened with the Wii game? I mean, I used to host bowling tournaments in my house every Saturday night, and all of a sudden Wii is like gone.
It does seem to have kind of fallen off. And I feel like they released the Wii U, which was the, like, I guess, upgraded version of the Wii or whatever. And
Hmm.
it really didn't gain any popularity. I don't know why, because it was great.
Yeah.
But I suppose there's the Nintendo Switch now, they've just announced, I don't know what they're calling it, but it's the equivalent of like the Wii Sports game. I don't know if they're calling it Switch Sports or what, but it's the same kind of thing. And I'm really hoping there's going to be things like tennis and bowling in it because that was great.
Yeah, because I mean, inside this studio, only because I think it's really cool to have it. I mean, I've got all the different garage stuff that or the band stuff, the drums and the guitars, and I mean because I mean to be a guitar hero was like the thing at one time.
Oh yeah, good times. I remember Guitar Hero and Rock Band. Those were good times.
I
I was
mean,
terrible at them, but I loved them.
oh my God, when they released the Aerosmith, I thought, yes, I can finally play with Aerosmith. Yes.
You know what? It was so exciting for me because like I've always been like a metalhead, and having the ability to play a video game with a great soundtrack and also feel like I got to be in a metal band, because that was never going to happen in real life,
Right.
is awesome. And I just remember getting my hands on it for the very first time, and I was rubbish at it, but I didn't care. I felt like I was a famous rock star, and it was the best.
How do you prepare for the shows? Do you sit down and do a lot of research? Because if you were to spot me in my studio at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I mean, I it's like I'm studying for a final exam. I mean, what do you do for your research?
So we're really blessed because we have a team of people who work with us. So we all work together. We have a very hands-on kind of deciding on what the guests are. And then we put together like kind of a document that has information about the guest for ourselves. It's not necessarily something that's going to come up in the show, but kind of knowing the person's history and like their experiences that we already know about, what things they're known for, and then being able to do a little bit of research beforehand. And then for me, because of time zone differences and stuff, I will usually get our sheet that has all of the information about a person if I don't know them already. And I will, at 8 o'clock in the evening, I don't want to talk about the fact that I'm drinking a cup of coffee at 8 p.m. Don't judge me. I get my coffee, I sit down at my computer, I read over that again just to make sure I'm kind of clued in. We make sure that we kind of get information from, because a lot of the people that we interview are on social media. So kind of things that they are already publicly sharing. And then those of us who know the guest, not necessarily personally, but maybe know a little bit more about them, can fill in any background information that isn't necessarily publicly knowledgeable. And then we sit down, we have that conversation. We usually catch up a little bit before the episode starts, just to chat and make sure that everybody's comfortable. And then we get right into it. And it's really great. I feel like it's a great way to get to know people.
Absolutely. Confronting the word no. And what I mean by that is I created a podcast called Future Homes, and it's all about exactly that, future homes. But yet when you get with these CEOs of these things that would make the future home better, they go, no. No, no, no. It's just like a book author. You run into more no's than yeses. Are you running into the same thing?
Not yet. I'm sure we probably will at some point, but at the moment we've been having a pretty good run of yeses, which is quite great. But I'm sure it is going to be something that we bump into, and that's inevitable. But we've been pretty lucky so far.
Yeah. One of the things that I put on my podcast on iHeartRadio was what's called the Unlucky Seven. And Unlucky Seven is that everybody sets out to do a podcast, but after the seventh episode, they drop. How are you going to battle that mountain to get to number 100, to 200, episode number 300?
So one of the biggest things, well, actually, let's say two. One thing is that before we even started recording, because this was so important to us, before we started recording, we actually compiled a list of people we would like to speak to. And if we didn't have a specific person, we also listed topics. So for example, if we had like a particular event that we wanted to talk about, or a type of game that we wanted to talk about, or something like that, we filled that in. Some of the things that I'm really keen on talking about are getting children involved in programming and learning how to do game development. So that's a topic. And then I have like one or two people that I know of that do a lot of that work in the UK, for example, things like that. And we've made a massive list. Like the list is huge. We've already started reaching out to people. We started reaching out to people before we started recording, so that we definitely have a lot of different guests that we can talk to and a lot of different topics that we can cover. And I think having that preparation beforehand has really helped.
Wow. God, I could talk to you all day. What's your website so people can find you and learn more about you?
So my name is Psyche. I stream on twitch.tv/Psyche. That's PSYCHE. And I'm psycheplays.com and Psyche Plays on social media. And the podcast is Boss Level, Boss LVL on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and wherever you get your podcasts.
You got to come back to the show. The door is always going to be open for you.
I would love to. Absolutely love to. It's been wonderful speaking with you.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Thank you. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.